Hello everyone, Kirk Warner here, and I'm joined today by Charlie Merrill, who is a licensed physical therapist, and today we are going to be talking about a 15-minute, roughly, stretching and mobility routine that you guys can be doing at home just to kind of polish off a good day of fitness. So let's dig into it.
This flow is going to start at the head and shoulders, and we're going to work all the way down to the feet. You need two things. You need a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, and ideally a floor. We're going to start with the first exercise, which requires the foam roller, and Kirk's going to show us. So to release tension around the neck, shoulders, and upper back, as well as to help with breathing, Kirk's going to lie on his back, so the foam roll supports him from his tailbone up to his head. He's going to have a gentle tuck with his chin, so his neck's not hyperextended, and he's going to start with his arms overhead. Then he's going to explore the full range of movement from about shoulder height up to fully overhead, trying to get the backs of his hands to touch the floor through the whole range. If you can't do that, you're going to spend a minute or two working on taking deep breaths, trying to relax with gravity your arms down to the floor. We're still on the foam roller, still working on the upper body to help with breathing and to help with running posture. Kirk's going to turn the foam roll sideways. He's going to start with this on his mid-back. His hands are going to support his head. He's going to lift his hips up just about an inch, and he's going to use this as a big rolling pin to mobilize his mid-back and his rib cage, taking what's normally a forward curve like this and trying to reverse it into extension so he's actually bent backwards over the roller a little bit. He doesn't need to get his head to the floor, but he does need to keep it supported by his hands so he doesn't strain his neck. And he's going to explore from the base of his neck down to his lower ribs, kind of at the base of his shoulder blades, for about a minute. Always trying to breathe, always trying to stay relaxed. And next we're going to work on the tension that develops in the low back from the impact and strain of running over time. All we need now is that hard floor that I mentioned earlier. Kirk's going to start lying on his stomach and press up on his hands into extension. He's going to, as always, try to be relaxed, take some deep mindful breaths. And he's going to sit back. After about 20 seconds, he's going to sit back onto his heels into a child's pose position. He's going to try to relax his head, relax his shoulders, and just let his back fully release into the opposite posture, which is flexion. After he does that, he's going to flip over onto his back, and we're going to go into a figure 4 rotation where he grabs his knee, his hip's about 90 degrees flexed, and his opposite arm is back in that sort of stretch for his shoulder and his pec that we talked about before. He's going to wind up and sort of wring out his lumbar spine 20 seconds one direction, and then go to the other side, 20 seconds in the other direction. Just one rep for about 20 seconds for each of these movements is all you need before we move on to the hips. So now that we've finished releasing the lumbar spine, we're going to head south, and we're going to do the hip all in one foul swoop. We're going to do the glutes, we're going to do the TFL, I call the pocket muscle, and the IT band, which is its lower half, and we're going to hit the adductors on the inner thigh. We need a foam roller and a lacrosse ball to get these three things done. You want to start with the glutes?
Yes. Okay.
Kirk's going to figure 4, cross one leg over the other, if he can. If he can't, he can just have his legs sort of in a seated position. He's going to explore around relatively gently because the ball's pretty hard, and he's going to look for spots that are especially tender. He can either explore and move around for a minute, or he can stop and spend some time and breathe through some of the more tender trigger points. Make sure you get the upper section of the glute, but don't neglect the lower hip rotators down closer to the hamstring. Really important and meaty area to mobilize. Now we're going to switch to the TFL, the upper part of the IT band, and the muscles on the on either side of the IT band itself, the quads and the hamstring. Kirk's going to start rolled forward, rolling on the pocket muscle, which is this muscle right in the pocket of my pants. This is the muscular part of the IT band, and it's worth spending a little bit of time, at least 30 seconds to a minute, just on this part, before then rolling down further into the IT band proper. And I like to say that what Kirk's really working on here is sort of the outer part of the quad as it meets the IT band, where there are a number of trigger points along the whole length from the hip to the knee. And then if he rolls the other leg backward, he's going to be on the back edge of the IT band where it meets the hamstring, where he's going to get some of the trigger points at that junction too. You'll find that you get much better results if you hit the front and back edge rather than rolling right on the lateral part where it's bony. Third muscle we're going to mobilize around the hip is the inner thigh, the adductor. Kirk's going to lie down on his stomach with his leg out about 90 degrees. And he's going to work from his groin all the way down to his medial knee, exploring, as usual, for tender spots, trigger points where he can either move back and forth across them or stop and breathe through them. Notice he's also going to do some shearing as he's moving north and south. He's also going to consider moving east and west and shear across that tissue to break up some of the fascial restrictions that come from running. Now that we got the hips opened up, we're going to move on down the chain to the thigh, starting with the quad and hip flexor. We're going to use a death stretch. We're assuming that if you have a floor, that there's a wall nearby. So Kirk's going to put his foot up on the wall on the leg that he's stretching. He's going to have his knee on the ground. Ideally, there's carpet. If there's not, maybe use a pillow or dish towel or something soft. He's going to sink his hips down towards the floor with his hands on the ground as a starting point. And a lot of you will be really tight in this position first. So you can either work in and out of it or just hold it for a bit, maybe up to a minute per leg. Once he gets better at this and he starts to get more flexible, he can work his way into a more vertical trunk position where he'll find that the stretch significantly increases both in the front of his hip and down his quad to his knee until ultimately he's fully upright. You always want to be breathing as we continue to reinforce. There shouldn't be a lot of pain. We want this to be restorative and relaxing. Let's move on to the hamstrings. So for the back of the thigh, we chose this variation because the hamstrings tend to prefer a dynamic stretch to a static stretch. So Kirk's going to bend over at his waist. He's going to keep a very straight back. He's going to go to the point where, with his knees slightly bent, he already has a little bit of a stretch in the back of his body. He's going to alternate slowly and gently, straightening one knee and letting it rebend before repeating on the opposite side. I'm going to ask Kirk to spend about a minute doing this. He gets a little bit of a flossing effect in the back of his body, and when he gets done, this should feel very good before we continue to head south into the lower legs. Moving on to the lower legs, we're back with our foam roller, and Kirk's going to show us how to mobilize his calves and his shins. He's going to start with doing both legs at the same time. I like to encourage my athletes to either be straight with their feet, toed out or toed in, depending on which part of the calf we're trying to get. I want him to work from his knees down to his Achilles tendons, down to his heel cords. And when he finds a spot that feels particularly sensitive, I like people to pump their ankles or do circles, again, to get some fascial effect to break up some of those adhesions. Always trying to relax and breathe. This can be very intense. If it's not intense enough with two legs, he can cross one leg over the other, has a little more weight, and he can get a little more impact in the calf and the muscles that are deep to the calf, which are super important for the ankle and feet, which we'll get to in a bit. Let's switch over to the shins. Kirk's going to come on to kneeling on the foam roller. He's going to toe in just a little bit so his feet point towards one another, and he's going to drop in to the meaty shin muscle on the front of his lower leg. Same thing, he's rolling from his knee down to the mid to lower shin, trying to relax, take some deep breaths. He can also pump his ankles a little bit if he finds a spot that feels particularly sensitive. And if it's not enough pressure, he's going to shift one leg over the other, and all of his weight will then be on just one leg, which can be super effective if you can tolerate it. So after rolling on the lower leg, I like to encourage runners to stretch their calves and ankles out a bit. Kirk's going to lean against the wall. It's just sort of a typical runner's stretch, but a few details that are really important. If the camera comes around to the back, you're going to see that Kirk's foot is very straight, if not slightly toed in instead of being toed out. If the camera continues to come around, you're going to see that Kirk's arch is relatively high, so I'm going to get him into a more supinated position as opposed to a flat pronated position. I want him here before he goes into that stretch to open up his calf. Give it a good 30 seconds per side, and then we'll move on. And finally, and maybe most importantly, the feet. We're back with our lacrosse ball, and we're going to do a little rolling on the arch on the bottom of the feet. Put the ball on the ground. You can adjust your body weight depending on how much you tolerate here, but essentially you're going to roll north-south and east-west again, starting at the heel and then working your way forward to the ball of the foot. This is going to bring a ton of blood flow and a lot more elasticity to the foot. And while you're going to lose me here, you'll get a good shot of what's happening to Kirk's feet, to the joints, the muscles, and the connective tissue, keeping them supple, healthy, and happy.
Guys, that is your routine. I hope you find it helpful. This is something that I think is going to be best done if you're just kind of hanging out at home looking to kind of get some mobility and some stretching in before you go to bed or whatever, or if you're at the gym and need a little routine as well. Again, thank you, Charlie, for joining us and helping us with the routine. If you guys like this video, let us know by clicking the like button. And if you have questions for either of us, hit us up in the comments and subscribe to our channel as well to get all the updates for our new content. See you in the next one.